You don't know everything. So can you ask Siri just to be sure? So reluctantly, I pull out my phone and I say, Siri, are mermaids real? And Siri says, not that I know of. And I'm thinking, come on, help a dad out here, you know? And now I'm gonna try and pull a fast one on my daughter. I say, honey, see, Siri agrees with me. Mermaids aren't real. Of course, my daughter's really clever. She says, no, Dad. Siri said she doesn't know if mermaids are real. And then she said this. She said, Dad, can you ask Google? So you ask Siri to ask Google if mermaids are real. Google will know. Here's the point. The point is, we all want to know what's true, right? And it starts when we're really, really young with questions like, are mermaids real? Or why is the sky blue? Or those kinds of questions. We want to know what's true. But it doesn't end when we're kids. It continues on into adulthood. And it actually turns into the big questions of life, like, why am I here? What's the purpose and meaning to life? Does God exist? And if God exists, why is there evil in the world? And what happens after we die? You know, these are the big worldview questions. And as you begin to get answers to these beliefs and form these together, they shape your view of the world. Yeah, we call that a worldview. Now, we're going to be talking about truth this morning. And I actually want to begin with my favorite Bible verse here. Don't look it up, okay? It's on the screen. It's not coming through. Okay, let's try this again. Let's see. Boom. Can you see that? Not yet? Okay. Let's see. I'll give it just a second here. Could it be one of these like little cords over here? Oh, something flicked. No. Something flicked. I mean, I can just keep rolling here. You got it? Okay, they're seeing it. Okay. So it's on the screen. This is kind of important, so I'm glad that we have this on the screen. Here it is. Jesus is speaking. He says, I am one of the ways, one of the truths, and one possible life. You can come to the Father through me or not. It's all good. Live and believe whatever you like. It's cool. Whatever you choose is okay with me, as long as you're sincere. Some of you are thinking, what version is that from, right? Is that like the Message Bible or something? No. And I already did the second opinions joke, so I'm not gonna do that again. No, of course, that's not what it says, but I think it's a good contrast. Here's what it actually says. It says, I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Now, when you read verses like that or quote verses like that in our culture today, there's going to be quite a response, okay? You may get called names. You might get called arrogant. How could you say such a thing? Or intolerant, or narrow-minded, or even bigoted. When we read these verses, people are thinking one of two things. Either this is bigoted, or they think, oh, that's just true for you, but not true for me. You know, they might say, my truth is Buddhism, or my truth is Hinduism. Or my truth is some Oprah Chopra spirituality or something. Jesus is true for you, but he's not true for me. Now, we're living in a time in history that before you can argue that Christianity is true, we need to be able to argue that truth exists at all, because there is an assumption within the culture that truth does not exist. All right, so that's what we're going to talk about in this session. Now, I shouldn't need to convince you that truth matters to the Christian, okay? If you think about it, We talk about a word of truth. God's word is true. That's what it says in Scripture. We talk about a spirit of truth. We talk about a God of truth. All of that presumes that there is such a thing as truth. If you get rid of truth, then all of a sudden you undermine Scripture, you undermine God, you undermine Christianity, okay? And truth is under attack. That attack comes in the form of what we call relativism. Relativism. Now, maybe you've never heard that word before. It sounds like relativity. And it's not relativity. Okay, so in science, we talk about relativity. What's that? Well, like, for example, you're not moving right now. You're sitting still in your seat. Okay, now that's true. Relative to your chair, relative to the earth. Okay, but it turns out that in a different kind of reference frame, you're moving pretty quick. In fact, the earth, because it's spinning, you're moving right now, believe it or not, at 1,000 miles per hour. And the earth is orbiting, and it's moving at like nearly 70,000 miles per hour. So you have like this, what we call relativity, or we might use the term relative in this way. That's not what I'm talking about, okay? I'm talking about something else. So this is called relativity. Relativism is the idea that there is no objective truth. There is no objective truth. And this is the dominant worldview of the culture, okay? I want to quote for you from a book called The Closing of the American Mind, Alan Bloom. He says this, and this was, by the way, in 1987. So we're talking like over 3 decades ago. Here's what he said. He said, "There is one thing a professor can be absolutely certain of. Almost every student entering the university believes or says he believes that truth is relative. The student, of course, cannot defend their opinion. It is something with which they have been indoctrinated." And there really is an indoctrination happening. It's when they watch commercials, if your kids even watch commercials. It's in the, we took our kids to see Super Mario Brothers. You heard that movie? About that movie? It's done really well. The first 3 commercials that came on before the movie started were all promoting this idea of relativism in one form or another. It was unreal. My wife and I are just looking at each other like, man, you can't escape this stuff. It's all over our media, our movies, our songs. I want to show you a clip from a video. This is a guy who actually went to a university campus, and he was asking students some questions. Now, the point of me showing you this video is I want you to hear their response, okay? It's not necessarily the content, because he asked, what if I said I'm a woman? What would you say? What if I said I'm a Chinese woman? This kind of thing. My point is not to weigh in on the transgender thing. That could take us into a different direction, okay? What I want you to pay attention to in this video is how they respond. They are not willing to tell him he's wrong. And that has everything to do with relativism. Let's watch this. Try that again.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would you...
Okay, ready? Let's rock and roll.
If I told you that I was Chinese, what would your response be?
I mean, I might be a little surprised, but I would say, good for you. Yeah, be who you are.
I would maybe think you have some Chinese ancestor.
I would ask you how you similarly came to that conclusion and why you came to that conclusion.
I would have a lot of questions, just because on the outside I would assume that you're a white man.
If I told you that I was 7 years old, what would your response be?
I wouldn't believe that immediately.
I probably wouldn't believe it, but I mean, it wouldn't really bother me that much to go out of my way and tell you, no, you're wrong. I'd just be like, oh, okay, he wants to say he's 7 years old.
If you feel 7 at heart, then then so be it. Yeah, good for you.
So if I wanted to enroll in a first grade class, do you think I should be allowed to?
Probably not, I guess. I mean, unless you haven't completed first grade up to this point and for some reason need to do that now.
If that's where you feel like mentally you should be, then I feel like there are communities that would accept you for that.
I would say so long as you're not hindering society and you're not causing harm to other people, I feel like that should be an okay thing.
If I told you I'm 6 feet 5 inches, what would you say?
That I would question.
Why?
Because you're not. No, I don't think you're 6'5".
If you truly believed you're 6'5", I don't think it's harmful. I think it's fine if you believe that. It doesn't matter to me if you think you're taller than you are.
So you'd be willing to tell me I'm wrong?
I wouldn't tell you you're wrong.
No, but I say that I don't think that you are.
I feel like that's not my place as like another human to say someone is wrong or to draw lines or boundaries.
No, I mean, I wouldn't just go like, oh, you're wrong, like that's wrong to believe in it. Because I mean, again, it doesn't really bother me what you want to think about your height or anything.
All right, so you can watch the full video on YouTube, but the point is, notice there's such a hesitancy to say that someone else is mistaken, to judge another person's belief, right? If there's one sin in the culture of relativism, okay, it is telling someone that they're wrong. You can't do it, okay? So why is that? Why is that? What's going on here? By the way, these aren't just hypothetical examples of this guy giving these questions. There's actually like real life examples in our culture. For example, how many have heard of Rachel Dolezal? You've heard of her? Yeah, she made headlines because she was a chapter president of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. The problem is, she's not a colored person. In fact, she was born and she looked like she could fit in with my family, okay? Like my 3 blonde girls, white, skin, blonde-haired girls at home. But here's the thing. She identified as black. She felt black, and therefore she was black. That's the logic behind it. Or how about Emil Rattleban? You guys familiar with Emil? He is a 69-year-old, or was a 69-year-old TV personality, called himself a positivity guru. That sounds like fun. He was in great physical condition, all right? So he went to the doctor, and the doctor was like, man, you got the body of a much younger man. And he's thinking, wait a minute, maybe I am a much younger man. Well, how much younger? Well, he petitioned to the courts having his birthday changed from 1949 to 1969. He wanted to make himself 20 years younger. He wanted to be 49, not 69, okay? And so here's this idea, like, I feel this way, therefore I am. And the culture, and of course, who are we to say that someone else is wrong? Who are we to judge someone else? In 2018, Oprah got up at the Golden Globes, and she said, speaking your truth is the most powerful tool we have. When she says speaking your truth, I know what she means. She means your perspective or your experience. But you don't get to have your own truth, okay? That's not the kind of thing that's just yours. Something is either true or it's not, okay? It's either true, and if it's true, then it's true for everyone. It's not just your truth. So what's the problem with this idea that there is, when someone says there is no truth? Well, fundamentally, here's the problem. It is self-refuting, okay? Now, I know Frank Turk's been here, so he would probably train you in some of this. If someone tells you that there is no truth, then you ask a question. And what's the question? That's right. Is that true? The claim refutes itself. It's like sawing the branch you're sitting on, okay? Because you're making a truth claim as you're saying there is no truth. What is someone going to say? There is no truth. And you say, well, is that true? Are they going to say, yes, it is true, that there is no truth. Well, that's a problem, right? Now I'm affirming truth. Or they're going to say, no, it's not true. Well, then why did you say it, right? So there's a real problem here. Now maybe you haven't had your third cup of coffee yet. So a self-refuting claim, here's some examples. If I said I can't speak a word in English, that would be a self-refuting claim, right? Because I just spoke it in English. If I said my brother is an only child, right? Some of you guys are getting that. Okay, Winnie the Pooh. There was an episode we were watching, Winnie the Pooh, and he's got a bunch of annoying friends, right? And Piglet comes knocking on the door, and Pooh doesn't want to play with Piglet, so he says, nobody's home, you know? But you got to be home to say nobody's home. I was at the grocery store, and there's a headline in the National Enquirer, and it said, woman gives birth to her own father. Huh? Woman gives birth. Who's buying that? You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't got to investigate that claim. It is false as soon as you read it. And then, of course, when Justin Bieber sings Never Say Never, you know, he refutes himself. So let's look at this question on truth. Let's talk about the nature of truth. If we're going to understand truth, we got to define some terms. Now, this is a question, by the way, the question about truth goes all the way back. In fact, we see it 2,000 years ago with Pilate's interaction with Jesus. If you remember, Jesus finished telling Pilate his kingdom is not of this world. And Pilate says, so you are a king? And Jesus said, you say that I am a king. For this purpose I was born, and for this purpose I have come into the world. Here's why Jesus came into the world. Here's why he was born, to bear witness to the truth. And then he says, everyone who is of the truth listens to my voice. Then Pilate said to him, what is truth? Now, I actually think it was more like a write-off, he's not sticking around to get an answer for what truth is. Like, what is truth? Kind of thing. Okay, so let's answer that question together. Now, philosophers call this the correspondence theory of truth. That's kind of a, philosophical title, the correspondence theory of truth. But simply put, it's when a statement or a belief matches up with reality. When a statement or belief matches up with reality, okay? Truth is when you describe the world the way it actually is. When you describe the world the way it actually is. So maybe I'll drive this home with an illustration. So I need 2 volunteers who are going to tell me, they're going to guess at my first car, okay? My first car. Now, I just need the make and model and the color, okay? So take a guess. What do you think was my first car? Don't be shy. Yeah, throw it out there. A white Honda Civic. That's not bad. That's not bad. Okay. What do you think? Oh, here we go. We are friends, my friend. A red Ford Mustang. I used to just ask people what car I drive, not my first car. And virtually, every time someone would shoot their hand up, so proud of themselves, and say, Prius. Not cool, I'd have to ask them to leave. So I'm glad. We got a red Mustang, we got a white Honda Civic. Now, here's the thing. We can say with certainty that they both can't be right? Because they're making contradictory claims. My first car can't be a red Ford Mustang and a white Honda Civic, okay? That's not how it works. And so here we have conflicting claims. So, okay. Now, how would we know who's actually right, or if either one is right? How would we know? We got to check what matches up with reality. So you'd maybe ask me, or you would go maybe look through some old photos or something, do some investigating. If I said to you, actually, here's my first car. You got the color right. You got the color right. Now, why are you guys laughing? What's so funny about this? Now, you're thinking, Yeah, not the Prius. That's now you're all laughing because you know this does not correspond with reality. Okay? You know it's not true. And so you already know what truth is. It's what matches up with the world. This clearly doesn't match up with the world. And if I showed you this, now you're thinking, okay, that probably matches up with the world, right? So you're both wrong. It's not true. It's not true. This is what's actually true. Okay, so when we think about this, it's what matches up with the world. Here's the problem. When it comes to issues of morality and religion, people change what they mean by truth. See, everyone understands what truth is. We just talked. Hey, there it is. There's my car, first car, and you guys are like, no, that's not it. You understand truth. But as soon as we talk about morality and religion, people are like, oh, that's true for you, but it's not true for me. What's going on there? Well, here's another illustration to kind of drive home this idea. If I said to you, what's the best flavor of ice cream? What are some? What's the best flavor? Who knows the best flavor of ice cream? Yeah, what do you think? Cookies and cream. Okay. Any others? Butter pecan. Okay. What kind? Any? As long as it's ice cream. I like where your head's at right now. Okay. Any others? Mint chocolate chip. Okay. Now here's the thing. I got news for you. You're all wrong. The best flavor of ice cream is actually Reese's Peanut Butter Cup ice cream. Who's with me? Wow, these are my people. Who says that's not true? Okay, and like I said before, we're going to get you guys Bibles. We'll pray for them later. Now, here's the thing. How can some of you say it's true and some of you say it's not true? How can that happen? How can something be true and not true at the same time? Well, of course, you guys know what's really going on. When we were talking about ice cream here, we were talking about personal preferences. So I said this earlier, so we got a little bit of overlap here with our first session, talking about evil, and our session this morning. You guys remember what I said? I said that those kinds of claims, like ice cream claims, are subjective, which means they depend on the subject, okay? The subject determines it. So when you say mint chocolate chip, or if you say, butter pecan or whatever, that is true for you. That's your opinion. That's your preference, okay? That would be a subjective truth claim. Now, here's another question. What medication controls type 1 juvenile diabetes? Insulin. Now, I noticed no one put up their hand and said, butter pecan ice cream, right? No one said Reese's Peanut Butter Cup ice cream. Why not? This is a different kind of thing. When we start talking not about ice cream, but about insulin, we're talking about something different. There is no other options. If you went to the doctor and they said, look, you have type 1 juvenile diabetes, but don't worry, we have insulin that'll help control this for you. And you say, doc, that sounds really narrow-minded. That sounds really intolerant. I'm going to use McDonald's to control my diabetes, or donuts, or gummy bears, or whatever. No, it doesn't work like that. This is the kind of truth that if you get wrong, it has deadly consequences, right? And so I want you to think of these two categories. This insulin category we might call objective truth. You have subjective truth that depends on the subject. The subject's belief makes it true. But then you have objective truth, and that doesn't depend on the subject. It depends on the object you're talking about. That's why they call it objective. So when we talk about insulin controlling diabetes, we're talking about the object insulin doing something in reality. Okay, so we have these two different claims. Ice cream versus insulin, or objective truth, subjective truth versus objective truth. Now, did you guys know there was going to be a quiz? You wouldn't have come this afternoon if you knew there was going to be a quiz. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put up a statement, a belief, And you're going to yell out whether you think it's ice cream or insulin, okay? What kind of claim is this? I'm not asking if it's true or false. I'm just asking what kind of claim it is. Okay, here's the first one. Coke tastes better than Pepsi. Ice cream? You are a good start. Okay, correct. Ice cream. It's preference. Some people, I know there are very strange people out there who prefer Pepsi over Coke. How about this one? Coke Zero has less calories than Coke. Ice cream or insulin? Yeah, that's insulin. It has 0. It's supposed to have 0 calories, okay? So Coke Zero, that's going to be an objective. We're talking about the object itself and what corresponds with reality. Okay, very good. How about this one? The Toronto Raptors won the NBA Finals in 2019. Now, some of you may not know if this is true or not, right? You don't follow basketball, you don't follow Toronto Raptors. Fair enough. But notice, this is a historical claim, and the kind of claim it is an insulin claim. So when we come across historical claims, like say in your New Testament, in the Bible, and it's making a claim about something, that can't be true for you, but not for me. Jesus walking on water is not an ice cream claim. It is an insulin kind of claim. Now, you may not believe it as a naturalist or an atheist or whatever. Fine. But it's not the kind of thing that's just true for you, but not for me. Okay? Historical claims are insulin claims. How about this one? Mount Airy Bible Church is the best church. Nice and loud? I knew there'd be a couple insulins. Got to represent, right? But again, there's going to be some preference stuff involved in this, right? And so that would be, sad to say, but an ice cream claim. Ooh, how about this one? Tim Barnett can bench press 200 pounds. Nice and loud. See, I heard a couple ice creams and I'm offended. Totally offended. Now, this one's interesting, right? Because some of you guys are looking at me and you're thinking, there's no way that guy's bench pressing 200 pounds. And here's the thing, though. This kind of claim, again, we could set up a bench press up here. I could get down on that thing and just boom, show you guys what's up. No, it would probably destroy me, right? It would crush me, and we'd have to call an ambulance. We're not going to do it, okay? But again, it's the kind of claim is an insulin kind of claim. It's a false insulin claim, right? Tim can bench press 200 pounds. That's false. It's a false insulin claim. Okay, how about this one? Earth is the center of the solar system. Ice cream or insulin? It's false, but is it ice cream or insulin? It's an insulin claim. Notice that's a scientific kind of claim, right? It has to do with science. Has to do with the planetary motion. Has to do with, so in this case, science claims are insulin claims. They're not personal preferences. It doesn't matter what the scientist prefers. When it comes to doing science, that's how it's supposed to work. We're looking at what really corresponds with reality. And we want to keep the preferences to the side, right? So this would be an insulin kind of claim too. Okay, how about this one? Abortion is wrong. Ice cream or insulin? Nice and loud. Okay, you guys are good. I'll tell you what. This is not a scientific claim, although science weighs in on it. We talked about that last night. It's not a historical claim. What kind of claim is that? It's a moral claim. It's a moral claim. And I know we've kind of talked about, because we talked about this last night, you guys were already kind of prepped and ready to go. And you guys have also been thoroughly taught in apologetics for years. But I'll tell you this. I go into churches and give this exact same presentation, and these are conservative evangelical churches, and the majority of people will shout, ice cream, to this claim. There is a huge confusion over where morality belongs. What category? Is it insulin, or is it, which corresponds with or is it just my personal preference? Is it just my likes and dislikes? And so we have this claim here, abortion is wrong. I believe that this is an objective claim. Objective insulin claim, not an ice cream claim. But what happens in our culture, and I talked a little bit about this yesterday, is it gets turned into an ice cream claim. So a number of years ago, I graduated teachers college, and I had all these friends that weren't Christians. And we would kind of debate topics and have discussion. And I had posted on Facebook that abortion was wrong and made a comment about abortion. And one of my friends from teachers college said, if you don't like abortion, don't have one. Now notice what happened. I said abortion's wrong, and she read that through her relativistic filter and said, oh, that's ice cream. If you don't like, and so what do? If you're talking ice cream, if you don't like chocolate, don't have chocolate. Have vanilla, or whatever. That's how you would respond. And so that's how she responded. She turned my claim into an insulin claim. So what I did was I said, well, are you against slavery? And I said, are you against spousal abuse? And she said, of course I am. What kind of question is that? And I said, if you don't like slavery, don't own a slave. If you don't like spousal abuse, don't abuse your spouse. Now notice, by the way, if you don't like slavery, don't own one. That was an actual argument that was used 200 years ago. Notice they're taking a moral claim and trying to relativize it. And so I said this, and she said, but slavery and spousal abuse are really wrong. And I said, exactly, so is abortion. What I was trying to do in this illustration is to show, look, morality belongs in the insulin category, not the ice cream category. And the way you can help do that is take something that people agree on as being really evil, really wrong. And for a lot of us, it's things like you just bring up something like slavery or murder or rape or whatever. And it's like, can't you see how evil this is? This is not about likes and dislikes. It's about insulin. It's about objective truth. So these are two different kinds of claims. And in the same way, when it comes to the abortion issue, these are two different kinds of claims. Now, okay, so how do you show someone that morality is really an objective insulin thing? One way is to point out to people that morality is really just like ice cream, likes and dislikes, then that means you can't say that there's anything that's really evil in the world. There's no evil. You can say you don't like something, that's fair enough. You don't like what Hitler did? Okay. But some people did. You don't like what some shooter did? You don't like what Osama bin Laden did? You don't like it. But you can't say it is really objectively wrong. Because that doesn't exist. It's not that category. That's what happens if morality is just likes and dislikes or ice cream. Now, here's the thing. When you call something evil, and this is what happens in these discussions, you call something evil, there must be a moral law, a moral standard that's being appealed to. And this is where the culture, again, this is my kind of hypothesis. One of the reasons relativism is so deep in our culture is because we've gotten rid of God. And people know there is a natural connection between a God who gives the moral law and moral laws. And if I don't want a God, you get rid of God, you're just left with I decide. And I think there's a connection there. I think people see that connection, and so what are they doing? They're ditching the moral law so they can ditch God. And so, look, God is the standard of goodness, and he gives his commands that we are to follow. But when you get rid of God, then who gets to decide? Well, any culture, any individual, whatever. It's kind of like this. How do you know a good bowler from a bad bowler? How do you know a good bowler from a bad bowler? You guys bowl around here? Anyone bowl? Is it their shoes? No, it's not the shoes. Is it like the funny shirts they wear or whatever? No, it's not the shirt. How do you know a good bowler from a bad bowler? It's the score. You look at their score. Well, here's a bowler, and they have a 186. Is that a good bowler or a bad bowler? Well, and some of you are like, the only way you can tell if they're a good bowler or a bad bowler is if you appeal to what? The absolute standard. Because look, I could just say, well, here we go. Let's compare this bowler with other bowlers. He does way better than the guy who gets 97 or 54, but not as well as the guy who gets 201. So yeah, maybe if I compare his bowling score with another bowler, that will help. No, that is not how you know if you're a good bowler or a bad bowler. The way you know if you're a good bowler is you look at the absolute score. And in bowling, that absolute kind of objective score is 300. That's how you know. In the same way, so let's move from switching from bowling to morality. How do you know if you're a good person or a bad person? Well, you have to look at the objective standard. I'll tell you what most people do, though. What they do is they compare themselves with other people. So are you a good person? I mean, if we went to the local mall, if there's like a busy place around here that people are checking out today, and we just started asking people, hey, would you consider yourself a good person? 9 out of 10 people will say they're a good person. But I'll tell you what they do. They end up saying, well, they start comparing themselves. Well, I've never stolen anything. But then you talk to the guy who comes up and he says, well, I've stole a couple things, but I've never hurt anybody. And then the next guy comes up and he's like, yeah, I'm a good person. I mean, I've hurt a couple people, but I've never killed anybody. And then the guy who comes up, who's the murderer, you probably shouldn't be talking to him. He's like, well, okay, sure, I killed like one person, but I'm no Adolf Hitler. You know what I'm saying? Like, we end up comparing ourselves to other people to justify our goodness or our badness. But that's not how it works. We ought to look at the objective perfect standard. I've quoted this a couple times. I never put it on the screen. But in Romans 2, it's fascinating. Paul is making an argument in the beginning of Romans where he's basically saying, look at God's existence is clearly perceived. People are without excuse. How does he reveal himself? He reveals himself in nature, in creation. That's Romans 1. And then conscience in Romans 2. And here's what he says about the Gentiles who don't have the law. They don't have the Old Testament law to look at, but they had something. He says, for when the Gentiles who do not have the law by nature do what the law requires, they are a law to themselves. Even though they don't have the law, they show that the works of the law are written on their heart. And I actually think that this explains why there's this, generally speaking, there's this kind of moral understanding that human beings have. Now, is it gone askew and has it been darkened and has it been hardened and all this other stuff? Absolutely. But there is this kind of recognizable moral conscience that we all have. C.S. Lewis, he famously said, look, if you want to show the moral laws written on someone's heart, just like cut in front of them in a lineup. And all of a sudden that person who is like, there's no moral law, they are really upset, right? Because thou shalt not cut in front of someone in line. There's a story of a philosopher named Frank Beckwith. And he's on a radio show, but he's actually there being interviewed, and he's debating this woman who's a relativist. And she's going on about how there's no truth and everyone decides for themselves and all this stuff. And as she's going on and making her case for relativism, he grabs her purse and starts going through it and pulls stuff out. I don't know, it was a phone or makeup or whatever. He starts pulling stuff out. She notices in the middle of her opening speech what he's doing. And she says, "Hey, what do you think you're doing?" And he said, "I'm taking your stuff." And she goes, "You can't do that. Hold on, wait a second. Weren't you the one who just said that there is no objective truth, there is no objective morality, there is no right and wrong, we need to decide for ourselves? So I'm deciding for myself, and I'm taking your stuff." Notice in that little engagement that her relativism, though she could speak it out, she could proclaim it, she couldn't live it, right? And this is the problem. Relativism is unlivable. There's this story, I don't think it's true, of maybe it is, but a philosophy professor assigns students to write a paper. So this student decides, I'm going to write a paper on relativism. I'm going to defend relativism. And so the student goes through and writes this, fantastic paper defending relativism, hands it in with an orange folder. We call them duotangs in Canada. Okay, there's a weird Canadian word for you. Okay, a little folder, puts it in, submits it. When they get it back, it's got a big F on it. And the student's like, "What? This is a really good paper." Goes to the professor. Says, "What's the deal? You gave me an F." And the teacher said, "Well, oh yeah, yours was the one defending relativism, right? Oh yeah, that was really well argued. That was, wow, really well articulated. You had all your points in there, your arguments. But here's the thing. I don't like orange folders. I don't like orange folders. So I gave you an F." And it's like the student, the concept, the idea is, yeah, honestly, if there is no right and wrong at the end of the day, and everyone decides for themselves, the professor can do whatever the professor wants. And in this case, the professor can put a big red F on the cover because I don't like orange folders. And what's the relativist going to do? That's unjust. That's unfair. That's not right. Hold on a second. Those words are appealing to something beyond relativism, to an objective standard, right? It's unlivable. It's unlivable. Okay, so let's continue our quiz here. How about this one? Ice cream or insulin? All have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. Now, here's the thing. This claim right here, this is another moral claim. This is like the central moral claim of the gospel, okay? This is the bad news, right? And the good news only makes sense in light of the bad news. That we are sinful, that we are sinners. Try telling people the gospel, that they need the good news, in a culture that is so infused with relativism. It becomes almost impossible. Because our starting assumption when we say, look, Jesus died for your sins, presumes there's such a thing as sin, that's a problem that needs to be solved. And so as a church, we need to be informing the culture that truth really does exist. Why? Because then we can share the gospel, right? Here's what C.S. Lewis says. He says, "It is after you realize that there is a moral law and a power behind that law, and that you have broken the law and put yourself wrong with that power. It is after this and not a moment sooner that Christianity begins to talk." You want Christianity to talk? People need to understand there's a moral law, and that there's a power behind the law, and that they have broken the law, and they need to become right with that, power. He's talking about God. They need to be right with God. That's when Christianity will begin to talk for people. It's a brilliant attack from the enemy that there's no truth. If you undermine truth, you undermine the gospel. You undermine Christianity. And so Satan has pointed his guns at truth. And when you annihilate truth, you end up undermining Christianity in the process. How about this claim? Jesus is the only way to God. Ice cream or insulin? You guys are getting it now. It's like, okay, it's all insulin from now on. But what kind of claim is that? There's only one way to God. This is actually like a theological claim, right? And people want to put theological claims in the category of ice cream. And so when I say Jesus is true, they hear Jesus is true for you, or Jesus is true for me. But my truth is Hinduism or Buddhism or whatever. So it's kind of like do you guys have Baskin & Robbins? You got all the flavors, right? You're looking at all the ice cream. Imagine instead you walk into a place, and instead of flavors of ice cream, you have flavors of religion. And you're over here standing in front of Christianity because that's your favorite flavor. But there's someone over here, and they're looking at New Age, and that's their favorite flavor. And you're over here, and you're calling out to them, and you're saying, look, don't eat that flavor. If you eat that flavor, you're going to go to hell. Could you imagine someone eating vanilla ice cream, and you saying, don't eat vanilla, you need to eat chocolate, or you're going to go to hell? People will be like, what is wrong with you? Right? But this is what happens when we put religion into the category of ice cream. It sounds ridiculous to people that we're over here saying, you got to eat this flavor. What do you mean I got to eat that flavor? What are you talking about? Because they're assuming that religion is like ice cream. And so they'll say things like, all roads, look at Tim, all roads lead to God. All roads are going to get you there. The problem with that claim is, this goes back to truth. What do the religions actually say about God? What do they say about reality? And it turns out they're saying very different things. They cannot all be true. It's kind of like the two cars. When we say all religions are true, it's like all the cars you guys come up with were my first car. No, that doesn't make sense. Your car can't be red and white at the same time. It can't be a Ford and a Honda at the same time. And in the same way, when we look at the world religions and we ask the question, are they basically the same? Well, here are the closest three: Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. They're all monotheistic religions. They're kind of like the Abrahamic religions. But when you start looking into the details, they're making fundamentally different claims. So, for example, take the central claim of Christianity, that Jesus died on a cross and rose 3 days later. What did the Jews say about that? Well, they say he died, didn't rise, stayed dead. What do the Muslims say? He didn't even die on the cross, okay? At least most Muslims will not acknowledge that Jesus died on the cross. And so certainly he didn't rise. Well, he either died on a cross or he didn't. He either rose from the dead or he didn't. You can't say they're all basically true. They're all basically the same, okay? They're making fundamentally different claims. It's kind of like me saying, are these two pills basically the same? And you're looking at them and you're like, well, they're both blue and they're both circular and they both have an A on them. Okay, you got a headache. Let's say you got a headache, and I offer you these two pills. Now, do you think that you might want to investigate a little bit deeper before you ingest one of them? Are they basically the same? Okay, let's flip them over. One is arsenic and one is aspirin. Now, if you have a headache, both of these will make your headache go away. All right? But one of them will make you go away. Even though there are superficial similarities, there are fundamental differences. And the same is true when it comes to the world religions. You look at the world religions, what you will find is there are some similarities. Man, you can find thou shalt not murder in like a lot of world religions. But that doesn't mean they're all basically the same, okay? There's some superficial similarities, but when it comes to the nature of God, the problem that needs to be solved, how that gets solved, eternal life, I mean, all these things, fundamental differences. When we say Jesus is the only way, we are making an exclusive claim. And I know that, I mean, it sounds bad to a lot of people. Oh, that's too, we want to be inclusive, not exclusive. Well, it turns out all truth claims have some kind of exclusivity to them, okay? You know that math is really exclusive? Like when I would give a math test, I didn't accept any answer that the student came up with. There was a correct answer. There's an exclusivity when you make a claim. And Jesus is the only way? Yes, it's exclusive. But here's the thing, it's also inclusive. On my view, it is an invitation to all people to come in to the kingdom, okay? And so it's inclusive in the sense that, man, it's a genuine offer of salvation for everyone, but it's exclusive in the sense that, look it, there is only one way. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me, is what Jesus said. And so, let me close with this, and then we'll take some questions maybe or a break. No other prophet, no other guru, no other self-help person, died for your sins. Only Jesus did that. Most people recognize that. He's the one who said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. In his famous Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow is the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. What's interesting is people talk about all roads leading to God, and when Jesus talked about roads leading somewhere, he said there are two roads. One is broad, one is narrow. There's a lot of people on the broad road. There are few people on the narrow road. The broad road isn't going to God. It's going to destruction. And the narrow road that only a few people are on, those are the ones who are finding life. So when people say all roads, they don't understand the world religions, they don't understand Jesus and what he actually taught. Does this sound like truth exists? Absolutely. Jesus thought truth exists. To deny truth, you end up affirming it, but truth exists not just as a proposition, it exists as a person, the person of Jesus, who was trying to reconcile the world back to himself. And so truth came. Think about this. Truth, capital T, truth, came to the world to proclaim truth so that we would know the truth and the truth would set us free. That's what the gospel is all about. Let me pray. Father, thank you for this short time here where we got to study the nature of truth and how central it is to our beliefs in the gospel and Christianity. I pray that you would help us have this antidote so we don't fall prey to all this relativistic disease that's out there. I pray that that as we learn to defend truth, that we would be able to articulate and communicate that with others who have been taken in by relativism as well. Help us to use this to the best of our ability outside the walls of the church. In your name we pray. Amen. All right. Oh, yeah, I want a water. You saw me looking for it, didn't you? You're like, okay, so, well, actually, what's our time scale? Do we take a break now? Or do we want to do, because we could do questions at the end of tactics.
Let's do
if
that.
we want to do a break now.
Yeah, do a 10-minute break.
Okay.
10-minute break, and then come back.
10-minute break, we'll come back, and we'll be back in business.